All right. Thank you, Noah, my work husband. 15 years together.
I do have to say that every so often when I talk to Noah, and I feel like my job is I get to talk to interesting people all day long.
Sure.
And every so often he says to me, well, James says blah, 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 right? And it's inevitably like some really smart comment.
Oh, yeah. No,
So.
that's not true. But thank you, James. All right. So just one thing. Thank you to everyone that helped put this together into the Noy House. I did want to just say that it's so cool. We're actually the third most important, James, or I'm the third, you're the second. This is a stage where James Dean used to be on, Orson Welles. They filmed I Love Lucy here. So just a really, really cool place. And I'm so glad to be here.
If this was Desilu and then Paramount, is that what this was?
I don't know. That goes beyond my knowledge. But a very cool historic place. So it's really great to be here and see everyone. So as mentioned, I'm going to talk to James about, try to do a myriad of conversations about AI in the enterprise. James has been at Bloomberg Beta for 12 years, a long time. I think we all know Bloomberg. If you're in the finance world, you know Bloomberg has those amazing terminals. But they also do a lot of venture capital too. I wanted to start at the base layer of AI, James. So I've rewritten my questions to James like 3 times now because so much has changed in the last 3 weeks.
Right.
But over the last 2 weeks, we've had big tech do earnings. And so Microsoft and Satya Nadella, CEO there, came out and said they will spend $80 billion this year on AI infrastructure. Google reported earlier this week, they confirmed $75 billion in AI infrastructure. The week before last, Zuckerberg came out and said $65 billion in AI infrastructure. Amazon reports later today, but supposedly some people in the audience from Amazon are going to tell us how much they're going to spend before that report, which would be very cool. And then we had Stargate, which was President Trump, Sam Altman, and Larry Ellison saying they're going to spend $500 billion on AI.
So that adds into the 500 billion.
Yeah, in over 4 years, I should say, where the rest of these numbers. That is so much money, right? That's like unfathomable amount of money. And again, like I said, I love markets, right? So markets tend to say things. And then at the same time, we have DeepSeek, who comes out and, CNBC says what they say, and it freaks the whole market out. So what is going on? Why is there so much money moving around? What is the prize?
Okay, so we are definitely in this interesting point where we've now realized that, AI or LLMs are probably a general purpose technology, right? That they are widely applicable in all sorts of ways. And the terrific thing about our information ecosystem is everyone can find it out right now on Twitter or MSNBC. So thus, capital from all over the world has decided, oh, this is the next big thing. It's better than fusion. It's better than fighting some terrible war, right? But the terrible thing about capital coming in is that capital is always constraining and conservative. And there's a way in which the moment capital comes in, they say, you know what? Don't take too many risks. We really would like predictable revenue. And the terrible thing about AI right now is we are at this point where this is obviously a general purpose technology. There's not obviously a dominant business model. There's not obviously a way to make a bunch of money in the way that the web made a bunch of money, right? And then because these things take time, and also they take fundamental architecture shifts. Not just like technical architecture, but like fundamental shifts in the way that people do business. And it turns out humans, we're a little slow, right? It takes us time to figure out something or the right kind of relationship. And so in the same way that in 1994, if you try to do a shared address book, it was creepy. And in 2004, it's Facebook. And in 2024, it's kind of boring and lame and tired, right? And so we're right at that point right now where people are figuring out what these things are good for. And sort of, to be honest, we're a little dependent on the CFOs of these companies to massage the numbers just enough to show that the growth is coming from AI, even though the truth is you really don't want that extra $10 bill from whatever, Microsoft Office Copilot, because you're not really using it. Because, by the way, it's not quite good enough yet.
Yeah. So how do you, as a VC, so you're seeing these numbers go up, you're seeing the amount of money being invested in infrastructure, and then you got, the 2 girls or 2 guys in the garage knocking on your door with like, hey, I got an idea in AI. And you're like, okay, I'm a seed investor. I'm going to give you $2 million, go fight the Titans. Like, is it a scary time for that? Or is it like actually opportunities abound?
Yeah, it is and it isn't, right? Because one of the stories that everyone tells about AI right now is like, it favors the incumbents. And like, they're like, oh, senior managers will do so well. And that is totally convincing. People have very good arguments for that. Unless actually you work at a big company or you're one of those managers. You're like, what the hell? It's so hard to get anything done, right? It's so hard to build anything fundamentally new. And I think that's going to be true for a long time until some of these ideas end up, we have a whole set of ideas right now about how AI should be implemented inside the enterprise, and most of them are bad, right? And so the terrible thing about where we are right now is in part because there's so much capital moving in, there's this desire to like tame it and to say, oh, this is super straightforward. Don't worry about it, says McKinsey. You know, you just do these 5 steps, it'll be fine. And we are not yet at the point where you should be doing the 5 steps. You should be the terrific CIA sabotage manual, right? Because we're definitely firmly in like explore mode before you can exploit. There's almost,
is it hard to invest in the explore mode, or is that good for early stage
I think it's
marketing
good,
AI companies?
Yeah, it's good for early stage, but it's also terrifying and it's also confusing. And you're looking for signal, right? Because we're at a point where, like, I don't know, I was an early investor in a bunch of web transition stuff, right? There's a point where like something that looked really impressive turned out, like once Ruby on Rails came out, like turned out to be like super easy and it wasn't impressive anymore, right? And there's like this constant shift right now around like what is true signal and what is differentiated perspective and what is actually like a great potential product. And like what seemed really impressive to me a year and a half ago is now something, you know, a 9th grader could do with like Replit.
Okay, yeah, and that's scary. That's wild. And also, what we love about James is he's an engineer and a management consultant over his time before he was a VC. So he has fantastic both technical and kind of change and transformation experience. On this point, on this point, what Replit can do now that was crazy 18 months ago. Can we just briefly talk about DeepSeek and what is profound about DeepSeek and what is shouldn't have crashed the market 2 weeks ago by hundreds of billions of dollars, or maybe it should have. But
I mean, I think DeepSeek. So there are a couple different dynamics, right? So one is DeepSeek, super impressive. It's great that they built it, right? And in one way, DeepSeek matches exactly the sort of cost curves that everyone said were going to happen, right? That if you talk to like all the really smart people at OpenAI or Anthropic, they would have said, we're going to match this cost curve, right? And so the only freak out about it is the fact that it didn't happen in the US. Now, the truth is, like, there's something weird about information ecosystem in which, like there were a bunch of people, like, down the street who were, like, about to do something or show similar ability to cut costs, right? And the interesting thing is that, like, no one paid attention to them because, like, DeepSeek's a little bit more meme-worthy. And then at the same time, it's also true that it freaks everyone out because it's the player that they don't understand yet, right? That, like, if you're at Meta, you've been reading the DeepSeek papers, but you don't really know them because they're not right down the street, right? Sort of like there's a way in which the world is so global and everything, and it is also true that like Meta and Anthropic and OpenAI are all basically like a car commute away from each other,
They
right?
all know each other. It all feels good. We all kind of play by the same rules. Okay, and so if you're a marketing executive, what's the takeaway from DeepSeek? This stuff's getting cheaper and better, or anything else?
Okay, so
do I stop doing it for some reason?
Right. So we're like a year or two into this, right? And we're at the worst part for executives and CFOs because I hear this line from smart CFOs all the time. We're like, we are hard-nosed businessmen. We are measuring our ROI, and we're so diligent about only working on the best projects. And that is the worst idea right now. It is the worst idea because it is unclear where the returns are going to come from. Right? It is nobody knows. Nobody really knows yet. We're at the point where people have not yet figured out what the real moat is going to be and the place that you get continuing returns. But also, the other part is the only thing you are certain of is that, ROI, which is like sort of return on investment. Investment is the denominator, it's the bottom part. Like the costs are going to go down. So the only thing you know is that this is going to get cheaper. Like everything else, who knows? And so there's a way in which if you focus on the quote unquote big project, the 2-year project, you're kind of wasting your time, right? And there's a way in which like, depending on where we are in technology, there are different sweet spots as far as like length of a project. And there's almost a way in which we are at the point where it's a terrible idea to do these 1 to 3 year projects.
Okay.
The 1-minute things work really well. Like you chat and you create something really fast. And the real sweet spot is really like that sort of 1 day to 1 week project. Where basically a set of you go and build something. Or, like everyone tells everyone you should work on it yourself. And that's true, like Noah's right. But also, the other thing to do is just hire a bunch of underemployed 23-year-olds, right? Like you don't have to, you can't, like, and just watch them work, right? There's a weird disconnect in the labor economy right now where there's a bunch of 22 to 25-year-olds who are more clever than I was, right? And are having trouble getting technical jobs because Facebook isn't hiring anymore.
Yes, that's right.
And that's a fat opening for all of you. Basically say, you know what, let's just hire a bunch of these guys, and then let's have them work on these, not multi-year projects, not these 2-minute little chat things, but really these sort of 1 day to 1 week, like create a tool or create something that I can use right now.
Yeah. It's also great for your business because those guys maybe aren't going off and girls aren't going off and getting the $2 million RSUs from Facebook anymore, and they've got to actually
that might help
something straight up.
Right.
Okay, so I want to pick on this idea of starting quickly though, because there is a very good conversation in the community on how are we going to think about adoption. So I think most of us are products of the internet age, meaning it was very much a bottoms-up movement. And that's, if I think about the virality loops, all the things I learned in SaaS over the years from VCs and other entrepreneurs, so much of it was on the architecture of the internet allows you to bottoms up. But I've heard some very good arguments that actually AI wants more top-down executive buy-in, which might actually bring us back to say like the mainframe revolution and how mainframes went out. And I love the story of Sam Walton and how he thought about, hey, actually
visionary founder, visionary CEOs have to make big bets.
With a competitive advantage is going to be, I'm going to build a database, I'm going to plot the stores correctly, and my retail link, mainframe is going to outcompete everyone. And we all know the story of Walmart.
I think for most Fortune 500 companies, we are not at that point yet.
Why?
Because I think that right now we are still kind of in like discovery mode of a bunch of different technologies and a bunch of different approaches. And there's almost a win with later. What were we going to talk about? Like both consumer behavior is shifting because consumers are not yet used to this, right? They're not like, God forbid we're stuck in an infinite chat world. That'd be like terrible, right? And so like consumers are starting to change their behavior, and then we're just kind of watching to see what it takes. And there's a way in which like you make a massive, massive bet to align yourself with company X. Like it's good for your stock price because you get an announcement. But the truth is, working that through the system and actually getting it done at that sort of 1 to 3 year timeline, I think it's just really hard right now. It's often misbegotten.
So do you think, if you just had to bet, you got to lay the chip somewhere, are you saying AI is going to roll through the enterprise via bottoms up, or AI is going to roll through the enterprise top down? If we look back 5 years.
Okay, so yes, you're right. 5 to 10 years from now, it's probably true that one of the things AI will do better is it'll do a better job of monitoring and catching things. And thus all of the clever techniques that we knew about, like, sort of like, see Joseph over there from Capsule, like all the clever bottom-up PLG things, probably the accountants will catch it sooner than you would like. Right? And so that ability to like do that is going to be probably constrained in some ways.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
You know what I mean? Like you're going to see that, right?
Yeah. There's much more potential for AI could crave that centralization.
Right.
All right, let's move to a little bit to what you were touching on a little before, which is like, how do we get change in the enterprise so I love the Tyler Cowen, ultimately, there's people espousing, hey, we could see GDP go to 5-10% because of just how much AI could transform productivity. But Cowen's argument is like the human is the ultimate bottleneck. There's just no way around the idea that the human is in the way and the human will always be the bottleneck. And we can see how humans that get together a lot create bigger bottlenecks and sabotage, et cetera. If you're investing in these companies and things are moving slowly, how do you think about that? What's the window? Will it be different than, say, internet adoption or digital transformation, or is there something that you could imagine an entrepreneur could come to you and say, I've figured out how to get around the human problem, or?
Yeah, and so say, either you call the human the problem or you call the human the goal, right? The human is the end, right? It's not like some part of some huge machine. The human is the end and the goal. And so there's a way in which that responsibility, that is the job of the entrepreneur, right? Sort of if some entrepreneur comes to you, giving you some wild story and you don't understand it, it's their fault, right? like we're at the point where the entrepreneurs are just figuring out the right way to talk about it and the right way to get into your core need and deliver something quickly. We're just at that point right now, which is why you're seeing some of these companies grow really quickly, not just because they have nice steak dinners and great decks, but also because a number of them are actually figuring out how to deliver actual value sort of in a fast enough way. Now, there are lots of places where it's slow. There are lots of places right now where, especially around data management and transformation, you sort of there's all these fat opportunities sitting there. So at our core understand the world better.
Yeah.
But those are hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So there's other low-hanging fruit, right? It feels like there's a bunch of stuff that feels obviously true right now that no one's quite willing to acknowledge. And I feel like those are the places to play rather than, hoping to do a 3-year project.
Yeah. How worried are you about the idea that, you fund these companies, they go into these big enterprises, and what they hear is like, oh yeah, we use Copilot and it sucks.
Yeah.
Because there does seem to be like kind of like, and they're stuck in these, they're either in GCP, Azure, and you hear it like constantly.
But part of it is like, I think one is, I bet you that the term Copilot becomes just polluted, and it's just it signifies kind of being lame.
Yeah.
Like within a year, right?
Right.
I think that'll probably happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like, folks are building actual products now, right? Like folks are now building coherent enough products that they can hand over to you, and you can say, oh, I can poke this and actually use it, rather than hope that you might implement something 6 months from now, right? So and that's the other part that's changing.
Okay, let's move to just more specific, your current experience in marketing and advertising technology companies. A lot of the things I hear are, I hear agencies wanting to sell SaaS. And when I talk to SaaS entrepreneurs, I hear them talking about wanting to maybe sell something that looks more like services.
Yeah.
And then literally this morning, I believe, Palantir's market cap is up to 275 billion. Salesforce is 310 billion. So since I've been a kid in the world, like Salesforce was always the biggest enterprise software company. And now it looks like Palantir might eclipse it. And for all of us in SaaS, we're like, Palantir is not really SaaS, right? Like Palantir is something very different. And so what are you seeing from the early stage companies? Are they coming to you like the pure SaaS that we knew in the 2010s, where it's like, hey, we've got permissions, we've got a way to do it? What's different?
I think right now there's the market is so open and changing that you have to talk to your customers and be engaged with them in a way that you weren't before. Like you might
think about it as a different margin profile. Like, okay, now we're going to go from 85% gross margins to
part of it is like, of course, like it might be a different margin profile, but like the amount of money you charge might be fundamentally different, in part because you might be benefit based or like some version of utility where you charge per unit. And because I'm making fun of Joseph here because he's part of this company I'm involved with called Capsule that makes videos. Like there's a way in which one version is he charges per seat because his tool is so beautiful and it makes it easy for people to create lots and lots of videos in much easier ways. There's another version of it where basically because people create so many more videos and they're so much better that he should capture that relationship. And that incentive is more aligned.
And is that trend really happening? Like, are you seeing the cost per outcomes, the types of things that we're hearing about?
Yeah, so at the very margins right now, you are seeing people who are making that bet and making a lot of money on it, right? That like very quietly, there are a whole set of people who, would run call centers. Like right now, they're all kind of there are a number of guys who do outsourced call centers that they've switched to to per unit based pricing and then sharing the savings. And suddenly those guys are buying much nicer houses than that. Right?
I've heard that.
And so that's kind of working in a way that's surprising.
And so are you pounding on your founders to say, hey, get off the seat model, get off the...
I am at least asking them to like talk it through and talk it through with the customer. Because remember, again, like these things are not magical laws. These are relationships between people, between companies, and between people and those companies. And then as your expectations change as a consumer and a customer, then the opportunity for the entrepreneur to describe it differently also comes up.
Okay.
Right?
Yep. All right. So a little bit of time left. A lot of people are saying, hey, 2025 is the year of agents. The next talk from Lance Martin is about agents. I'm really excited for you guys to all hear from Lance. He's absolutely brilliant. Like, is there a bet there for you? Is a thesis there for you? Does that mean anything to you?
It is
Agent
possible.
Force real?
Right. Okay. So I'll say, like, what are agents? Totally unclear, right? But let me just describe a couple different aspects of agents that are really interesting right now. One is like, we could live in anyone have to deal with large scale enterprises where you have spaghetti code, right? Where you have lots of code written in multiple places, it's hard to move anything around. And then thus you are locked into SAP or you're locked into Salesforce. It is possible that 10 years from now, you're locked into your agent vendor because you have 50,000 agents running all sorts of different kinds of business logic. You have no idea what's going on. Right? That could be the de facto way that AI companies end up being able to expand their margins. So that's one part. The other part is when people talk about agents, they also get confused with like customer agents or call center agents. And the interesting thing there, which is the thing that is true right now, is that the EQ of the average LLM is better than the EQ of at least the median guy, maybe the 75th percentile guy, right? That they are more emotionally intelligent and more able to pick up cues than most guys, and we don't really know how to take advantage of it, except for the obvious ways that are slightly unsavory, right? Other than those, we're at that point. And so there are all sorts of things to be done with that, and we're not quite willing to look at it yet.
Yes. Okay, last question. Marketers in the audience, how far are we away from marketers will spend more time marketing to agents than humans?
Okay, so like I've got this terrific company that basically does nothing but create analytics for marketers to figure out sort of like how they're doing with the various like sort of big models.
Yeah.
Right, you know, how do you feel about whatever, name your brand, right? And that is like a lot of work. It is very interesting and fast evolving, right? And so I think that figuring out ways to appeal to or kiss up to whatever, right, these models is going to be
a good boy and girl to the model.
That's right. That's right.
Don't know.
That's right.
Noah, I need way more than 20 minutes. James, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure. So I'm James Cham, James at Bloomberg Beta. There's someone here right now who's like, they are working on a terrific project in a big company.
Yes.
And they're like, it is so irritating being in that big company. I totally know 50,000 people want to use this. Email me. So
there you go.
James at Bloomberg Beta.
Thank you, James.